Surprise, it's Mrs. Wolbrin.
Good day, mate. It's Mrs. Klein.
And we're going to continue with the Declaration of Independence. Just a reminder, our guiding question is what principles of government are expressed in the Declaration of Independence? And also our vocabulary, very important. We have common sense, Declaration of Independence, independence, natural rights, and petition.
All right, you guys, so we're moving into, if you're following along in the book, you can be open to page 110. The third section in this lesson is called Thomas Jefferson Drafts a Declaration. Okay, so a few weeks after the British left Boston, the Second Continental Congress appointed a committee to write a declaration or formal statement of independence. The task of drafting the Declaration of Independence went to the committee's youngest member, 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson of Virginia.
Jefferson's job was to explain to the world why the colonies were choosing to separate from Britain.
All right, and so they had to decide on the principles on which to base a new government. Okay, Jefferson's explanation was simple but revolutionary. He based his arguments on the principle of natural rights, the idea that all people are born equal in God's sight and thus are all entitled to the same basic rights.
Governments are formed, Jefferson said, to secure these rights, and their power to rule comes from the consent of the governed. If a government fails to protect people's fundamental rights, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it.
All right, and so the second part of the Declaration of Independence is basically like a breakup letter with the king. And so they also were talking about the king's crimes. Mm-hmm. So King George, Jefferson continued, had shown no concern for the rights of colonists. As evidence, Jefferson included a long list of the king's abuses against the colonists. And they had demonstrated that he was unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
The final break. On July 1st, 1776, the Second Continental Congress met in Philadelphia's State House to debate independence. By the end of the day, the issue was still undecided. The next day was cooler and calmer. On July 2nd, all but one of the 13 colonies voted for independence, New York casting no vote.
Okay, there was a bit of a debate about slavery, however. The delegates liked most of what they read, except for a passage on slavery. Jefferson had charged King George with violating the sacred rights of life and liberty of a distant people by carrying them into slavery. And almost no one liked this passage. Even delegates who opposed slavery felt it was unfair to blame the king for enslaving Africans. So this passage was removed from the document.
Okay. On July 4th, the delegates approved a final version of the Declaration of Independence. When they signed the document, they pledged to support independence with our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. This was a serious pledge because every signer understood that by signing, he was committing an act of treason against Great Britain.
And if you were caught committing an act of treason, you're a traitor, you were hung, right? Yeah. So this was definitely not something that they were taking very lightly.
Okay, let's just review what we learned in this lesson. The colonists organized an army, number one. George Washington took command of the Continental Army after the Battle of Bunker Hill. The Continental Army used cannons brought from Fort Ticonderoga in New York to force the British to abandon Boston in March 1776.
And on the eve of independence, the failure of the Olive Branch petition, remember the king didn't even want to look at it, and the success of Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense moved the colonies closer to the decision to actually declare independence from Great Britain.
Then we've got Thomas Jefferson drafting a declaration. Thomas Jefferson, a delegate to the Second Continental Congress, was selected to write the Declaration of Independence.
And then finally, you guys, there's the final break. On July 4th, 1776, the delegates approved the Declaration of Independence. But remember, they took out anything that had to do with slavery, however. For the first time in history, a government was being established on the principle of people's natural rights and the duty of government to honor those rights.
Okay, guys, remember, knowledge is power.
All right, I believe in you.